In page 222 of Quranic Geography, Dan Gibson wrote about the birthplace of Islam. He said, described as the mother of all cities. This is a term which brings to mind either a large and impressive city or a city of great antiquity. Then he wrote a verse from the Quran. I quote, "And this is a book which we have revealed, bringing blessings and confirming the revelations which came before it, that thou mightst warn the mother of cities and all around her. Those who believe in the hereafter believe in this book, and they are constant in guarding their prayers." Sadaqallahu al-Azim. Surah 692, translated by Yusuf Ali. The term mother of all cities, al-Qura, is still used for Mecca. End of quotation from Dan Gibson, Quranic Geography. The Quran verse said al-Qura. Means mother and al-Qura means villages. The verse said mother of the villages. Although many translated al-Qura as cities, the correct translation is villages. The Quran also described Mecca in Surah Muhammad, Surah 47, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and how many villages much more stronger than your village, which has cast you out, have we destroyed, and they had no helper. Sadaqallahu al-Azim. This verse tells us that Mecca was weaker than many other villages. The word used in this verse is also village, qarya. Now, from the verse 92 in Surah 6, Dan Gibson and others took it to mean mother of all cities. But as we seen in the verse itself, there is no all, and there is no cities. The verse only said, mother of the villages, not mother of all cities. But why the Quran called Mecca mother of the villages? Although it is less powerful than many others, because Mecca houses Al-Kaaba, the sacred shrine, to which many people, even before Islam, traveled to it every year to worship and to perform Hajj. In Quran Surah Al-Hajj, the pilgrimage, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and remember when we designated for Ibrahim the site of the house, saying, do not associate anything with me and purify my house for those who perform tawaf and those who stand in prayer and those who bow and prostrate, and proclaim unto mankind the pilgrimage. They will come unto thee on foot and on every lean camel. They will come from every deep ravine. Sadaqallahu al-Azim. That's why Mecca held a high and honorable status among the other villages and towns within the surrounding regions. However, its religious importance was of domestic interest to the Arabs from the lands around it, but not of any interest to the Byzantine, Persian, and all other foreign nations. That's why they did not mention or write about it. Accordingly, village is not a city, and Mecca is less in strength and power than many other villages. Its importance came because of Al-Kaaba, the safe shrine, the sanctuary. That will explain why you do not find defensive walls around it, because during all its past histories, it was always a safe sanctuary, where fighting was forbidden. There were no temples, because Al-Kaaba was their place of worship. Why would you want to have a temple? You already have Al-Kaaba and its haram. That takes us to the next point. They said that Mecca has no traces of walls that must have surrounded it in ancient times, no ruins of public buildings and temples that we expect to find in a city that the Quran called al-Qura. As we said before, Mecca was called al-Qura because it contained the first house for mankind to worship God, and because the Arabs used to make pilgrimage every year to it, not because it's city like the Byzantine or Persian cities, but rather it is a small village that God Almighty chose to place in it the last of the prophets, to reveal in it his last and final message to all mankind. Yes, it is neither large nor grand, nor its people with great knowledge, civilization, and supremacy among other nations. Rather, it is isolated and far from the centers of power and civilization of its time. Is not this the greatness of this new religion, which came among the weakest, the poorest, and the most divided nation? Yet, in a few decades, the principles and morals of the new message united these humble Arabs, made them rise above all other nations, spreading the good word east and west all over the world. Till the end of the 6th century, and for 1,000 years before, the world stayed the same: Greek then Roman Empire in the west, Persian in the east. This picture did not change for 1,000 years. Then suddenly, out of almost nowhere, these forgotten desert dwellers came out of their long sleep, armed with new religion, marched and liberated the people of the Levant, wiped out the Persian Empire, and confined the Byzantine back all the way to their homeland. Rather, this is the whole point. Dan Gibson, Tom Holland, and many others could not accept that this great religion is the one that put compassion and belief in the hearts of those desert dwellers and Bedouins, united them, so they came out of their isolation and astonished the world with the principles and values that they carried with them. They could not believe this simple fact, so they searched for a different explanation, because in their view, this is impossible to be the outcome of a new religion, considering they do not believe it is true. But to their despair, this is exactly what took place, because it is from God Almighty. Let's go back to our subject. Mecca was a village. There were no palaces, no public buildings, no temples, and no city walls. Mecca, in addition to Al-Kaaba, in its center, comprised of simple small houses, stables, stores, and their only one public building, which was called Dar al-Nadwa, where their leaders met, was a small, humble building. The Meccan lived a simple life, and built their mostly one-floor houses using mud bricks and small light stones for walls, and wood and palm tree leaves for roofs. Nothing from such buildings can survive in the past 1,400 years. To be found today by archaeologists, most probably the stones, if any, were recycled and reused. Dan Gibson wrote in his book, page 223, and I quote, "In 2002, I had the opportunity to visit the second conference on Nabatean studies held in Petra, Jordan, and organized by Al-Hussein bin Talal University. During the conference, I had occasion to speak with several leading Jordanian and Saudi archaeologists. I asked them specifically about the archaeological record in and around Mecca. While not wishing to be quoted or named publicly, they admitted that the archaeological record at Mecca was basically non-existent before 900 AD. I had expected them to defend the opinion that ancient Mecca was a walled city with houses, gardens, public buildings, and temples. They shook their heads and said there was nothing like that there. End of quote from Dan Gibson book. We asked Dan Gibson why you expected ancient Mecca to be a walled city with palaces, public buildings, and temples. Don't tell me the Quran called it mother of all cities. It called it mother of the villages. We already covered that subject. And do not tell me you read the word ha'it in Tirmizi or Tabari or Bukhari, because the word ha'it is not used for walls surrounding a city. It is used for a small perimeter or boundary wall to surround a piece of land. We call it huta. Then we have jidar, which is a wall of a house, kind of bearing wall or retaining wall. Then we have sur, which is for a high boundary wall, and this one used also for a city wall. The city walls you are looking for are called Aswar al-Madina. So the ones mentioned in the Meccan narratives were ha'it, a wall containing a piece of land, bustan, garden, not Aswar Mecca, which Mecca never had anyway. To have archaeological remains, structures needed to be built using big cut-to-size stones, none of which was in Mecca, other than in Al-Kaaba. Al-Kaaba itself was built with stones arranged in courses. The story of its rebuilding, which we and Dan Gibson know very well from Akhbar Mecca and Al-Tabari, told us that when Quraysh rebuilt Al-Kaaba just 5 years before the dawn of Islam, they built it smaller, because they could not afford the cost of the stones required to rebuild it at the size it was before. So they rebuilt it smaller. From this story, we learn that the Meccan were not extremely rich, which put to bed the idea that Mecca was the center of a trade route of international dimensions. We also learn that stones and wood planks were dear in Mecca. So do not expect to find archaeological remains other than Al-Kaaba itself, because there were no walls, no temples, no public buildings. If there were any stones within their simple buildings, surely it was recycled and reused many times throughout the past centuries. As for your story about your discussion with several leading Jordanian and Saudi archaeologists, as this story is not supported by any name or evidence that it actually occurred, no serious researcher will consider it or give it any value. However, if it ever did happen, I would expect these archaeologists would have told you that public buildings, temples, palaces, and defensive city walls did not exist in ancient Mecca. And whatever humble houses were, must have been washed away or rebuilt many times over. At least, in your story, you said they told you there was nothing like that there. Surely, they meant there were none of such buildings there in ancient Mecca. But you must have misunderstood them, and took it they meant the ruins. But I assure you, they did not. The Quran called it al-Qura, because the people of the other nearby villages and towns held it high above others, headed towards it to visit Al-Kaaba, the first masjid built for the people to worship Allah, which was raised by the Prophet Ibrahim and his son Ismail alayhum as-salam. We come here to the end of this episode, till we meet in the next episode, which is titled, They Claim that Mecca is next to Sodom, the city of Lot. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to this channel and share this video with your friends. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.